Once, a 13-year-old boy learned a dirty secret about an adult. It happened by accident. Perhaps the child would have preferred never to see it, but the deed was done. The dirty secret came to light. The only thing the dirty person could think of was to take the life of the witness. Help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. On November 9th, 2012, 51-year-old Mark Redwine woke up at 7 a.m. When he entered the living room, he saw his 13-year-old son Dylan sleeping on the couch. The man knew that the teenager was planning to meet his friends early in the morning, so he tried to wake him up. But Dylan said he wanted to sleep and wasn't going anywhere. Leaving his son to finish his dreams, Mark went about his business and returned home around 11:30 a.m. Dylan was no longer in the room, but an empty cereal bowl remained on the coffee table. The TV was broadcasting cartoons on the children's channel Nickelodeon. Mark walked around the house and noticed that Dylan's backpack, cell phone, and fishing rod were also missing. Apparently, his son had woken up after all and rushed off to his friends headlong. He even forgot to turn off the TV. The man decided to take the opportunity and nap a bit. He lay down on the couch and woke up around 1:30 p.m., but Dylan was still not there. Mark picked up his phone and dialed his son's number. No one answered the call. The phone was out of network coverage. Waiting until 3 p.m., the father went to Dylan's friends to find out where he had disappeared to. However, none of the friends had seen the boy or talked to him that day. "Dude, your dad is looking for you. You okay? We're all worried about you. Your mom called. She's worried. Dylan, seriously, when you get this message, call someone." Text messages from friends poured in one after another. But 13-year-old Dylan Redwine never responded to anyone, never called back, and never returned home. At that moment, Mark got nervous and went to the police station to file a missing person report. Right from there, he texted his wife Elaine and asked if she had spoken to Dylan and if she knew where he might have gone. To which the alarmed Elaine angrily replied that she was 7 hours' drive from Durango, and how could she know where her son might have gone? The woman insisted that Mark immediately contact the police, to which she received a response that he had already done so. The mother's worries were not in vain, since their son never made contact that day. After this very alarming exchange of messages between the ex-spouses, Mark completely stopped responding to Elaine. He completely ignored his ex-wife's calls, who did not miss the opportunity to accuse him of the disappearance of their youngest son. On the eve of November 18, 2012, 13-year-old Dylan Redwine flew to Colorado to spend Thanksgiving with his father, Mark. His parents had divorced several years earlier. Relations with his father could not be called good, so deep down the schoolboy was afraid of this trip. When the boy finally arrived at his father's cabin in Durango, Colorado, he sent his mom a message that he had arrived safely. Elaine supported her son, saying he did great and that she was proud of him. Unfortunately, this was the last message from her son. Dylan Redwine was born on February 6, 1999, to Elaine and Mark. He had two older brothers, Corey and Brandon. Brandon was their half-brother, Mark's son from his first marriage. 13-year-old Dylan was described as a typical teenager. He played baseball, spent time on video games, loved riding his bike and hanging out with friends. The boy never got into trouble and did not associate with bad company. Dylan's father, Mark, was a long-haul trucker. Due to his job, he was not often home, and this affected not only his marriage, but also his children's relationship with him. In 2007, after 18 years of marriage, Elaine decided to leave her husband. It was a very difficult and messy divorce. The ex-spouses had to divide everything they had and go through a custody battle. In the end, the court gave the children to the mother, and the father received visitation rights. Mark was very upset and stressed about the divorce and, unfortunately, took out his irritation on his own children. Because of this, the sons' attitude toward their father changed. They practically hated him. Dylan and Corey were very happy with the arrangement because they stayed with their mom. Brandon, by that time, was already old enough and had moved out to start his own life. After the divorce, Mark moved to Durango, Colorado, which was about 6 to 7 hours' drive from where Elaine and the children lived. The man was very upset that he could not see his sons often, so he took them to his place for holidays. Once in 2012, during another school break, Mark called Elaine and asked if Dylan could come to him for Thanksgiving. Although the boy was resentful toward his father, he knew he had to comply with the court order, so he was forced to agree to the trip. So, on November 18, 2012, Elaine drove Dylan to the airport. The older son, Corey, was already 18 and did not want to go anywhere, so Dylan went to Durango alone. The boy was afraid not only of his father's explosive temper, but also of the fact that Mark lived in an isolated cabin in the middle of the forest. There weren't many entertainments there. The only saving grace was a couple of Dylan's friends who lived nearby. That day, Mark met his son at the airport. They went to the store for groceries together. On the way home, they stopped at a fast food restaurant, got takeout, and had dinner at home. That very first evening, Dylan asked his father if he could spend the night at a friend's. The boy hoped to spend more time with friends than with his father, but Mark said no, so Dylan arranged to meet his buddies at 6:30 a.m. He was so desperate to get out of that house that he was ready to stay up all night. And less than a day after arrival, the teenager disappeared. Elaine was beside herself because Dylan had not made contact, and Mark was ignoring her calls. The mother and her older son, Corey, got in the car and headed to Durango. Arriving there late at night, Elaine first went to the police station. Together with several officers, they headed to Mark's house to find out the details of the disappearance and search the property. It turned out that while his family and the police were trying to find the child, Mark was sleeping peacefully. There were no lights on in his house, as if nothing had happened. The detectives found no clues indicating where the boy might have gone, and now they were trying to piece together what they knew. The police knew for sure that Dylan had indeed arrived at the airport. This was confirmed by surveillance camera footage. There were also frames showing the father and son picking out groceries at the store and then visiting McDonald's. The police examined Mark's movements that morning in more detail. From 8:30 to 11:30, the man was indeed running his errands. He stopped by his company's accounting office, picked up his paycheck, then went to the divorce lawyer's office and sent a child support check to his ex-wife, Elaine. Mark thought Dylan had either gone to the nearby lake to fish or headed through the forest to a friend's house. The latter was less likely since that house was 15 kilometers away. Given the frosty weather in Colorado, it was unlikely the teenager decided to walk that distance. 51-year-old Mark Redwine lived near the San Juan Mountain Forest, so the police had to cover a huge area. The authorities organized large-scale searches involving canine units, volunteers, helicopters, and drones. Hours passed, days passed, the searches continued. Thanksgiving came and went, but no trace of Dylan was found. His mother, Elaine, decided to create her own search team. They held press conferences, made flyers and posters about the missing child. Elaine organized fundraising and created a social media page dedicated to searching for the boy. A reward of $50,000 was also offered to anyone who provided any information about Dylan's whereabouts. All this time, Elaine was extremely suspicious of Mark. When she first came to the sheriff's office, she learned that her ex-husband had not contacted the police. At least, there were no records of it. Mark, in turn, insisted that his wife was happy to accuse him of every mortal sin, even that he was to blame for his son's disappearance. However, Elaine was sure that Mark was lying. According to her ex-husband, when he entered the house, the TV was showing the children's channel Nickelodeon, but Dylan had long outgrown the age when kids adore cartoons. The thing was, the boy hadn't watched Nickelodeon for about a year. He was 13 at the time and was more into music on MTV. Elaine was very disappointed. Her ex-husband knew his own son so little that he couldn't even come up with a plausible lie. During another search, the canine handler's dogs finally picked up a scent near the lake divers were called in. But, unfortunately, on the 9th day of searches, they found nothing. The police knew this was not just a runaway. Now they were definitely looking for the teenager's body. Brandon, Dylan's half-brother, was in another state at the time. He was married and had his own children. But when he heard the news of the teenager's disappearance, he dropped everything and immediately flew to Colorado to help with the searches. For some strange reason, only the child's father didn't search for the child. And when Elaine appeared on television and publicly stated that she suspected her ex-husband Mark Redwine, it was very strange and hurtful for her to see that Dylan's father practically did not help with fundraising, social media pages, or even the searches. He also completely ignored the police. The grief-stricken mother was disappointed. She fought every day to find her son, while Mark just sat and did nothing. Later, the police obtained a warrant to search Mark's house. They found several drops of Dylan's blood, but Mark explained that the boy had cut himself when he visited him last year. Nevertheless, the man was called to the police station to answer a few questions. At first, the detectives had no suspicions about Mark. Everyone grieves differently. For some, like Elaine, you need to do something, take action to cope with the pain. For others, like Mark, they worry inside without appearing in public. However, when the man was brought to the police, he exploded over the questions the detectives were asking him. Redwine caused a loud scandal, shouting that he was the victim, the injured party who had lost his son, and they were interrogating him like a criminal. Such behavior only led to the investigators becoming suspicious. Mark was forced to take a polygraph test, which he ultimately failed. In February 2013, another thorough search was conducted at Mark's house, and again, no traces of the boy were found. The disputes and mutual accusations of Dylan's parents raised questions, so Mark and Elaine were invited to the Dr. Phil show. Mark denied any involvement in his son's disappearance, while Elaine pointed out signs that her ex-husband was lying. In the end, the host invited the older son, Corey, and asked him to talk about family relationships. According to the young man, all three sons couldn't stand their father because Mark abused them physically and emotionally. He was cruel, rude, and mentally unstable. However, the father ignored his son's words here too. To sort out the situation, Dr. Phil offered to take a lie detector test in front of a live audience right in the studio. Mark agreed. But when the polygraph expert appeared, Redwine suddenly changed his mind. He said it was a waste of time, and then got up and left the stage to the boos of the audience. And even the polygraph expert said afterward that in all his years of work, he had never met a parent who was desperately searching for their child, but refused to take a lie detector test. In June 2013, the authorities organized new searches. For 5 days, over an area stretching more than 16 kilometers around the house where Mark lived, volunteers, police, and special search teams scoured the forest. Now they were looking for remains belonging to the boy, as no one believed he could still be alive. This time, the search operation yielded results. In the forest, they found pieces of torn fabric from a t-shirt, headphones, a sock, a shoe, and a strand of hair. All of this, as later confirmed, belonged to Dylan. The police decided to continue the searches, and on June 27th, human bones were discovered in the wooded area. Partial remains of 13-year-old Dylan Redwine were found about 13 kilometers from his father Mark's house. When forensic experts examined the found bones, they could not extract specific information indicating the cause of the teenager's death. Was Dylan's death the result of an attack by wild animals, or did he suffer at the hands of a human? In the spring of 2014, Mark Redwine called one of the reporters and said he was going to check himself into a psychiatric hospital because he felt like he was going crazy from all these persecutors and haters. The man claimed that Elaine drove past his house and shouted that he was a murderer. Soon after, Elaine obtained a restraining order against Mark because she feared not only for her own safety, but also for the safety of her two sons, Corey and Brandon. The woman said that during their 18 years of marriage, there were cases where Mark showed aggression and got physical. The sons always took their mother's side, and in August 2015, almost a year later, Mark Redwine was finally named the prime suspect in the case of his son, Dylan's death. Mark was the only one who had serious inconsistencies in his story. Plus, all this time, he behaved really strangely. On November 1st, 2015, a biker was riding along the road when he came across a human skull, about 1.5 kilometers from the original burial site of the skeleton's bones. It was later determined that the remains belonged to Dylan Redwine. During the examination, the pathologist found a skull fracture right above the left eye and blunt force trauma to the back of the head. Earlier, Mark claimed that Dylan got lost in the forest and was mauled by wild animals. But the medical examiner checked this theory, stating that the injuries were clearly inflicted by a human, although the previously found remains had been mutilated by animals that left tooth marks on them. When the father suggested that unknown persons kidnapped the boy and then killed him, throwing the bones near his house, the investigators directly told Redwine that nothing indicated kidnapping. It simply made no sense. So Mark came up with another new story and told everyone that, in his opinion, Dylan got lost in the forest and was accidentally shot by a hunter. The man believed so strongly in this theory that he even filmed his own investigative experiment on video, where he demonstrated how the boy could have been hit by a hunter's bullet. Moreover, Mark posted this video on social media. Everyone was shocked because it seemed like he was the only one coming up with various theories, but never participated in the searches. Everyone knew that Dylan's skull was damaged from a blow with a blunt object, and if it had been a gunshot wound, there would have been a bullet hole in the skull. Despite the gruesome finds, the case was not moving forward. Elaine was in despair and took extreme measures. She gathered people and held a rally right outside Mark's house to force her ex-husband to go to the police and get justice for Dylan. The mother, who had lost her son and was doing everything to find him, was now certain of one thing. While she was raising funds, speaking at press conferences, and giving all her strength to searching for the child, the boy's father, who knew the answers to all the questions, just sat at home and made up incredible stories. However, many considered Elaine's actions to be over the top. In the summer of 2017, after 5 long years of struggle, the police finally had enough evidence to arrest Mark and officially charge him with killing his son and child abuse, resulting in death. At that time, the man had moved from Colorado to Washington, D.C. Tired of the constant rallies outside his house organized by his ex-wife, Mark was arrested right at work. In August 2017, Mark Redwine pleaded not guilty to the charges. Elaine was not even surprised because he never took responsibility for his actions, even despite the evidence presented. In fact, the trial only began in 2021 because it was postponed more than 10 times due to various delays. The first time it happened because of Redwine's lawyer, who was arrested himself for domestic violence. Then Mark had to find a new defender. Then the pandemic started. Many trials were postponed at that time. The new lawyer got COVID, which delayed the case even more. But in 2021, a trial date was finally set. And that's when all the truly horrific and disturbing details came to light. The prosecution team believed that Mark killed Dylan by hitting him on the back of the head with something heavy. The guy fell to the living room floor and during the fall received a fracture of the brow ridge. Then the man dismembered the body, put the remains in the bed of his truck, and scattered them throughout the forest. Specially trained dogs smelled human remains in Mark's truck bed, on his clothes, and in the living room. The police, using ultraviolet lamps and luminol, also discovered blood stains throughout the living room, on the floor, on the couch, on the coffee table, and under the rug. It was becoming obvious that Mark was the one who sent his son to the other world. But the question arose, what was the motive? How could a father raise his hand against his own child? And then Dylan's older brother, Corey, testified. He said that a year before Dylan went missing, The brothers were on a trip with their father. Mark was a long-haul trucker and took his sons on a run. Dylan and Corey sat in the back seat, watching videos and movies on their father's laptop. When they wanted to browse photos, they opened the photo gallery and came across very disturbing pictures of their father. The brothers immediately closed the laptop and waited until they got home. Once home, they locked themselves in the bathroom and photographed the pictures from the laptop onto their cell phones. In these photos, Mark's face was adorned with provocative makeup with bright red lipstick and blush. He was wearing a red bra, a blue lace top, and an adult diaper full of human feces. In the next photos, Mark was licking feces off the diaper and then shoved it into his mouth altogether. Naturally, after such photos of their father, both guys were shocked. They couldn't wrap their heads around how an adult could voluntarily do such a thing. But the teenagers also knew they couldn't tell anyone about it. After all, Mark was their father. Dylan was 12 at the time. The photos from his father's laptop undoubtedly traumatized his psyche. Over the year, the boy brought up the topic a couple of times with his older brother Corey, and there were suspicions that Dylan asked Mark about the photos when he came to visit him for Thanksgiving on November 18, 2012. Essentially, Dylan was still a child all this time. Curiosity was tearing him apart because he didn't understand what it all meant. He probably also couldn't get the horrific images out of his head, and his father was the only person who could explain it all to him. But Mark completely lost it. He yelled at Dylan and was beside himself with rage. It was this intense anger that led Mark to make the horrific decision, to take his son's life so he couldn't reveal his terrible secret. The man clearly had mental issues, but during the crime he was fully aware of what he was doing. In response to the charges, Mark said that the photos did not depict him, although it was obvious to anyone that they were his photos. Then the man accused his ex-wife, saying that Elaine had deliberately used Photoshop to attach his face to photos from the internet to make him look bad. As for Dylan's bones found in the forest near the house, Mark said that the kidnapper deliberately planted the remains so that suspicion would fall on him. The prosecution called Mark Redwine's first wife, Betsy, as a witness. She had been married to him for 6 years, and they had a son, Brandon. Their marriage also had a lot of arguments, a lot of shouting, a lot of insults. During the divorce, Mark threatened her, saying he would rather kill Brandon than give him to Betsy's custody. Most likely, this was why the son from the first marriage was raised in Elaine and Mark's family. Brandon himself also testified against his father. He noted that all this time he had never seen Mark cry, get nervous, or be depressed. It was as if the father didn't care what might have happened to his youngest son. Mark's defense tried to dismiss all the evidence and claimed that the compromising photos had nothing to do with the case and were made public to portray Mark Redwine in a bad light. The lawyer said that no one even suspected Mark until Elaine spread rumors and turned the crowd against him. Redwine's defense claimed that the child most likely died from an attack by a wild animal. However, the evidence indicated that death occurred as a result of violent actions. Witnesses reported that just a few days before the searches began, Mark was seen on the same road where Dylan's remains were later found. It took the jury 6 hours to reach a verdict, and in the end, Mark Redwine was found guilty of second-degree murder, child abuse resulting in death. He was sentenced to 48 years in prison. Although it was not a life sentence, considering that Mark was 59 at the time, the court-imposed term meant he would spend the rest of his life in prison. When the defendant was read the sentence, he showed no emotion and sat with a blank stare. Surprisingly, to this day many believe that Mark Redwine is not guilty, that there is no connection between Dylan's death and the explicit photos, and that the defendant's intimate life should not have been put on display. However, the court considered the father's dirty secret the main motive for killing his own son. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.